Now then, the URC is continuing apace. We have Connacht Leinster at Sports Ground Friday evening, 7:35. We have Ulster, who've been in very good form, obviously away in South Africa. Lions Saturday lunchtime, and then Saturday evening in Limerick promises to be interesting for various reasons. Munster against the Bulls, 7:35. A win, you suspect, for many reasons, imperative for Munster, not least with Dublin. Leinster in round 6, and then Ulster coming to Limerick in round 7. So the games don't get much easier. Very happy to say Brian O'Driscoll is with us. Good evening. Hello.
Good evening, Joe.
So overarching thoughts. I haven't really talked to you since the start of the URC. Munster have kind of taken centre stage in many respects for all the reasons they wouldn't want.
Yeah, they have. Yeah, it's been a poor start. I think, when I was talking to, I think it was Jura a couple of weeks ago, it was Nathan, we spoke about the need for patience, and all people can really hope for are some green shoots at the moment. With that coaching ticket coming in, with the lateness of it, with when you make 3 or 4 big wholesale changes the way they have, it's very hard to hit the ground running. So I have sympathy for them. But so far, it's difficult to kind of see those green shoots. And I think that's what people are looking for, something to latch onto, some level of positivity. Whereas so far, the performances have been poor and little non-negotiables. I just feel as though, they really could up their work rate. I don't know if they're playing with very low confidence on the back of some of those early poor results, and now whether they're reading the press or it's getting the better of them, it just feels as though they've already gotten themselves into a small bit of a rut. And you're right, this game this weekend is a massive performance. I think game plans and everything go out the window on these weeks, where you just have to have that crazy intensity, that play with passion and spirit that has the supporters feel as though has been lacking in this team the early part of the season, and give them something to get behind and build your confidence that way. And do you know what, the game becomes an awful lot easier when you win those collisions, and all of a sudden game plans kick in a little bit more and you're on the front foot and it looks a little bit more seamless. Where the flip of that, everything has been going badly for them. They've poorly resourced rucks. They haven't won the collision zone. They've had so many unforced errors. But actually, on top of it all, I think strategy-wise, I don't get some of the things that they're doing at the moment, and maybe they just need to simplify things. And I've a couple of examples of them, at different times in the Connacht game. There was one where there was a scrum on the right hand side, and what happens in an awful lot of sequencing, and before you go to a scrum or line out, you'll call the maybe an 11 play or a 21 play or a 31 play. Now, what that is, it's hit up, and on an 11 play, then you come straight back down the blind side. On a 21, you'll hit up and go again, and then come blind side, and so on. You tend not to get 4-1. It'll be 3, and you'll get to the extremity. You won't want to go any further. So what they did was they did this 11 play where they hit up in midfield, and then the front row were dropping back. And by the time they'd finished scrummaging and coming back, the ball had come back out again to them, and they were all static, almost in line with Healy. And Kilcoyne, I think it was, hit it. Now, I don't know who's at blame, them not working urgently enough, or whether it's actually the calling of plays like that make absolutely no sense. There was another one on a midfield scrum where it was a great attacking opportunity. They went 9-12, and Goggins, and not to pinpoint, just the individual, but as soon as he got the ball, he took it, right? Straight away, Connacht were like, okay, that's not going anywhere. Double team. One of the best places to attack from. You probably have a 4-on-3. If you run straight, draw the man, or throw a mispatch, you suck people out of the defensive line. I just thought it completely played into the Connacht hands. And to be honest, Connacht weren't brilliant at the weekend. They really weren't. It was a pretty dour game in general. And they were maybe the less bad team. But you would be nervous for Munster that, if they don't have a big performance and so Dennis Leamy talked about the performance taking care of the result. Yes, performance first and foremost, and it should look after the victory. But if they don't get it this weekend, they will be hard pushed to get it in the following week against Leinster and Dublin, who are starting to hit their straps.
So I'm sure the root causes for some of those different things you've talked about are different. Resourcing of rucks is probably very different to that Goggins example you've mentioned. But in broad terms, why do you think these basics are going so badly awry?
I don't think there's a bit of individual responsibility. First of all, I think there's, I think probably there's a lack of understanding as to what they're trying to do. With the new messaging that's coming in, I think it's being lost in communication. If that is what the coaching ticket are looking for, well, they've got to have more urgency. And I do think in all times of, not saying it's crisis yet, but all times of adversity, the first thing that you go back to are your fundamentals of what can I do a little bit more? And that is, play with more urgency, play with a bit more intensity, play with a little bit of fear as well. And I just felt as though they've been lacking on all of those fronts, things that you would ordinarily associate with Munster teams, even the lesser Munster teams. And we are talking about, a Munster team that built, a large part of their reputation. Okay, this is going back to 78 when they beat the All Blacks, but also that team from the late 90s through all of the noughties. Like, that was a phenomenal team, and we do not have that team, and we got to get over that. That is, the Munster side to expect. But if you think about the side thereafter, the early years of the last decade, when they weren't the same team, they're still getting into semi-finals when maybe the quality within the team wouldn't have suggested they were capable of doing so. And that came from, that giving that support, something to cheer on, that home park factor, but also individuals really taking huge pride in the jersey. And I'm not saying that the current crop aren't showing pride in their jersey, but their performances feel as though, a bit like Van Graan's post-match interviews, they felt a bit dead. It didn't feel as though there was any life in them. And how do you inspire confidence? How do you generate confidence from your support base? You play it by big physical carries, by big collisions, by working hard, by really putting yourself out, by stressing yourself. Because crowds are perceptive. They can pick up on these things, and they can see when someone's going the extra mile, where you make a double or a triple effort. I just think at the moment it's all a little bit lackluster. And so if I was trying to go and fix things, I would expect another 10% out of everyone's intensity and energy being brought to the game, first and foremost. And the knock-on positive effects of that will be significant.
Yeah, it's very hard to get a read on what's going on. The two early performances in Wales, I mean, the Dragons one was just abysmal, really. And people on the show kind of put that down to, look, early season and the preseason was interrupted a touch, and maybe it's fitness. And then in some ways, the Zebra one was the most grim, because you have 3 pick and jam tries scored after 20 minutes, and you can't even get the bonus point at home on a fast track, perfect conditions. I mean, that was alarm bells. And then Connacht, which, like, the media were talking about,
great there again. Conditions were great.
Perfect conditions.
Like, it's a new 4G track.
Yeah, and no try, just 3 pick and jam tries, and all the talk of progressive rugby, and nothing, no fourth try at all. And then Connacht, I mean, the game has been talked about as the Desperation derby, in advance. And as you said, things are lackluster from a work rate point of view. I would find it hard to believe that they're not desperate to do well. So therefore, I think is it fitness? Like, genuinely, are they as fit as they need to be? Because you hear mumblings about that. Matt Williams was on the show this week. He echoed some of what you're saying. He said, look, we've got to be realistic here. They don't have the world-class players they used to have. And then Donnacha O'Callaghan said this as well early in the season. That second tier, that middle group, are nowhere near where they used to be either. And so it's like, you got a million different fires to put out here if you're Graham Rowntree.
Emerging Ireland hadn't helped them as well. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
Taking some of those supplementary players away that ordinarily would have, been come in and done a better job than those that maybe plugged in last weekend. And that's the reality of it. I think that gulf between 1 and 3 is really significant. Also, you've got Conway out, you've got Haley out, you've got Earls out,
Dennis Leamy did make the point. We have used 45 players in 4 games. It wasn't an excuse, but it is true.
It is a bit of a perfect storm at the moment with regard to injuries and new coaching staff and low confidence and lack of, intensity. But that, for me, and I will labour that point, that is the big thing, that the expectation this weekend. You know, other than Tide Burn, there's so little positivity to take from it. You know, the set piece, and sometimes that happens when a coach goes from being a forwards coach or being forward dominated into a head coach role or a director of rugby role, and they take an eye off what their expertise was. Sometimes it gets away from them, and you know, three scrum penalties in the first 25 minutes, multiple, few lineouts lost. You know, Munster have built their reputation on brilliant set piece, on launch play, on getting them over the advantage line and getting themselves into it, and then getting the crowd. If you don't win your set piece, how do you expect home park faithful to get in behind you? So I think there's a few, paring things back. I think a couple of very simple things: get really accurate at set piece, get accurate at the ruck, and fight with intensity and with belief that you're going to break tackles. Those three components will add significantly to their game, and the rest will actually follow suit. You'd be surprised. And all they need is one catalyst performance. You know, like, it feels like we're probably overly critical of them at the moment, considering the changes that have happened, but that can turn around very quickly. It's very transient. Negativity is transient as much as positivity is transient as well. So I think you've got to try and make sure that the next game, knowing what's coming in Dublin the following week, they must put in a big performance, and a big performance should take care of the result, although a very good Bulls team.
Yeah. And so in terms of their attack, because I guess if you look back over the last couple of years, what we were usually saying at this time of year when they were winning these kinds of early season games was, well, it's all very well, this approach now in the URC, it's not going to work for them in the latter stages of Europe. So this year they're not even doing those basics and winning these URC games and not getting credit for it. But the sense was the new coaching ticket, especially with Prendergast there, would play a more expansive brand of rugby that could, I don't know, elevate them beyond their previous ceiling. So do
they have the personnel, Joe, to play that brand?
Well, you can tell me. Are you seeing them trying to play that more expansive brand?
I am, but I think when you go beyond the international players, beyond Pete, beyond Tide Burn, Archer's good at playing at the line, but there's not many. Like, there really aren't. Like, Dave Kilcoyne looks incredibly uncomfortable on the ball at first receiver. You know, he doesn't want. He's predominantly a ball carrier, and so I don't know if this new style necessarily fits him. He tucks and carries well, and he's one of their better ball carriers. Don't get me wrong, but if you're trying to get him in a first receiver and being the playmaker of taking the ball aggressively square to the line, eyeballing someone with the option of popping in and out, but then pulling it out the back, that he's not your guy at first receiver. And I think that does come from years of being drilled, and I only can say that because I saw Peter Dooley come on for Connacht in the last 20-25 minutes, and I wouldn't have said that, you know, back in my time Peter Dooley was just coming onto the scene. He was this great ball player, but his ability to be able to draw that first defender, sit people down and pull it out the back is just rehearsed. It's a practice skill over years with Leinster of doing it day in, day out, week in, week out. And I think that's why they're one of the best teams at doing it, because they've been at it for so long. Whereas when you are bringing in this new style or this new expectation of your players, you can't expect them to deliver overnight. You just can't.
So in that respect, then, could there be a degree here of if Roundtree and Prendergast are absolutely wedded to this new progressive style, they might have to be having very tough conversations about, I don't know, sacrificing the next year to get everyone up to speed. I mean, I don't know if that's going to be accepted.
It's not going to be accepted, is it? Because you can't think, oh, well, you know, the thought of not being in Europe the following year has such a negative knock-on effect to bums on seats, to income. And I'm sure we'll talk about it a bit later on, around what's happening with Wasps and the Premiership and the struggles that these clubs are having. Well, you know, the IRFU are not propping up Munster, but having a significant say in their general kind of dealings and how they're functioning as a business. And that's the reality of it. And so many teams around the world are feeling the effects of the pandemic only now. People think, oh, everyone's back going to games again. Yeah, but what about the hole that's left behind? So it won't be acceptable for them to go, all right, let's focus on the next couple of years. We might have to take a bit of pain in the interim. When you're a top European club like Munster are, when you're meant to be in semi-finals and finals year on year, even when
Mm.
you've got, lesser teams, it's pretty unpalatable to accept, mediocrity, or to see it as stepping stones to something better in the years to come. You still have to deliver. You still have to get into Europe. You still have to be competing at that level.
Yeah.
You don't have to be necessarily winning, but I don't think you're going to get away with, oh well, this is a process.
And is it possible for because we're talking about this as well? It's like it's reductive Van Gran ball or it's champagne rugby. Like there's, I presume there's an effective in between that they could aspire to and get to relatively quickly. No, or like if you've got someone at first receiver who's that person has to be at first receiver and you can't play in between, or like how did the minutiae of
Well,
this work?
I think it's drills. Like I don't
Okay.
know what the makeup of of their preseason was, whether Prendergast and whether Prendergast and the coaching ticket were able to fully get into exactly what they want to do, or whether they're trying to kind of create a process between what Van Graan did and build on some of the good things and then add their tuppence work. Like it's very hard to just clean the slate and then
Yeah.
go, this is what we're doing now. And the expectation is to go and play that way if teams haven't done it previously.
Yeah.
And if you don't have the players with the skill set to play that style. Remember a few years ago, Rob Penny tried to do it
Mm.
with Munster, played the Crusader style, and that was thrown out after a season because it just didn't suit the players that they had. And
There was nearly
and
a
so at
riot.
times,
What's a
yeah, and
second
at
row doing on a wing?
times, yeah, and at times, like that they're capable of it.
Okay.
Some players are because of their handling. Like Coombs in at first receive, he's capable of doing it. Archer's good at it, but there's other guys that just don't have that in them. But then, with Leinster beforehand, there were guys that you thought, oh no, we don't want him in a first receiver. And then all of a sudden, a year or 2 or 3 years later, became brilliant on the line of being able to play all those options. So it's a learned skill, no doubt, but it's going to take time, and that is the big issue for
Mm.
the supporters and for the coaching staff and for the players, is to think about some of those senior players that are running out of time of ability to win trophies.
Yeah.
The here and now is all important.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's certainly possible at some point in the future, as you say, the here and now is crucial. Connacht did it though, you see Connacht who've transformed themselves and did it under Pat Lam. You said they weren't like outstanding themselves on Friday. I guess they were trying to recover from a very difficult start. So, what kind of ceiling are you seeing for Connacht, or where are they in comparison with recent years?
I don't know. Yeah, I think again a lot of unforced errors. A lot of uncertainty. I think obviously so much of what you do is dictated by your 10, and the confidence that kind of he exudes. And I think in both cases, the tens didn't have a good day, in Healy and Carty, and kind of conversely, you then see what is happening when Johnny Sexton plays for Leinster and is pulling the strings. Like it's night and day. And so it is very difficult if your 10 is having an off day, because they beat themselves up. They are tend to be high achievers, and so they beat themselves up and they go in themselves a little bit. Whereas you need an outgoing 10, someone that's barking orders, that's dictating play, that's getting them to run the show off them. And if that's not happening because they kind of have gone into themselves a little bit, well, then it has a negative knock-on effect to the overall team performance. So I don't know with Connacht. I think they've a good bit to go as well. What's the expectation this year? Is it to play European rugby? Of course it is. Will they get there? On the performance of what we've seen so far this season, I think they will be hard pressed, but they'll feel as though there's way more in them again. Big players like Prendergast are going to come back for them. And one or two other guys that have been away with emerging Ireland. So it's important for them to get those guys, keep them fit, and make
Mm.
sure that they just get a little bit of consistency of personnel in there as well, and get those units combining together. Carty's first game for months, so we'll give him a pass
Yeah.
on that one. But that runs out very quickly after 2-3 games.
Does. And I suppose the other point that's become very apparent over the number of weeks is that this is now definitely a more competitive league. The South African sides have settled, and we saw that at the RDS. We're seeing that in other games. So
Well,
the
it's great,
URC
right?
organisers have been vindicated in that sense.
They have. We're very lucky to have South African teams now. That's the reality of it, because um, that's driven the competitiveness now with this new seeding system of not qualifying for Europe automatically, depending on where you are, finish as a provincial team within that overall URC. Like that stuff is really important to the growth of the league in itself, and having South African teams now coming into European competition and showing what they're capable of. Getting to an All South African final last year. The Bulls having to do it the hard way, coming to Dublin to win a semi final. That stuff was great for the league. You don't want. I take my Leinster hat off. You don't want Leinster winning it every year. You just don't. You
Yeah.
want other teams, driving high standards and making sure that teams come through. And hopefully Ulster are beginning to show that, starting to emerge, and made some really great signings in over the last couple of weeks as well. So I think that bodes well for their future development. But yeah, we are very lucky. At times, it feels like a second team league. And now with the South African teams coming in, I don't think many teams are going to have the luxury of playing their second team very often.
Yeah. So Leinster Sharks then has been kind of widely acclaimed, and there were 18,000 at the RDS, and there were so many tries. Like, were these all, in the main, were these very good, high quality tries as opposed to bad defending? Like,
Yeah,
you can feel
yeah, I
pretty
do
good about
think
this
so.
game? Yeah.
Yeah, I do. I do. I thought it was a great game. I didn't see it live, and I saw it retrospectively. So when you see high score line like that
Yeah.
as a result, and then you go back and watch it, you do watch it slightly differently. But I was really impressed with the quality. From both teams. Some of the counter-attacking tries from the Sharks were outstanding. The try they scored in the first half off set play was really Leinster-esque. Just the lines of running, what they were trying to achieve, how they manipulated the defence, how they created uncertainty. I just thought, I haven't seen many teams being able to create chances against Leinster as well as Leinster have done in recent years, and I was super impressed with them. And anytime that Leinster are going to, was it 34 points or something? Leinster don't concede that very often, and
Mm.
just shows the caliber of the attack. But it wasn't just the bludgeon that you sometimes associate with these South African teams. It was high skill levels, really good individual scores. The winger, his name escapes me, but he had an outstanding game.
Yeah.
The footwork he showed once or twice, not for just for his own score, but in creating too. Oh, it was lovely to see. It really was. It was a proper game of rugby, and physical, and loads of niggle in it as well. And Sexton was kind of losing his head, and it's what you want. You
Yeah.
want
I know.
passion, right? It's about it mattering, about proving points and delivering, and not just waiting for Europe to roll around. You want to care, and as supporters you want to care. And I thought it was great to see from everyone's perspective. Those games are fab.
Mm. And I mean, it's been touched on the show already this week, but you do kind of keep a closer eye on Sexton given his age after any kind of layoff, and you don't want a player that age to go off a cliff. I mean, I think he's still climbing potentially. There's no
I
cliff in
honestly,
sight.
the mind boggles at times. He really is. He just sees it so well, and people give out to me for waxing lyric about him again, but I don't care. He's just one of the best at picking that pass at the line,
Mm.
leaving it late, taking the shot, and throwing the pass. And we saw it multiple times, even when they didn't score. Jimmy O'Brien, when he butchered the 2-on-1, like that was really magnificent to suck in both Werner Koch and the outside defender, having reached run that short line because he held it so long. So many other tens, particularly of his age, play play a little bit deeper, play a
Sure.
little bit self-preservation, not him. He's right on the line, and he's now finding a happy medium. He doesn't encourage the hits, but at least he throws the pass. He doesn't accelerate into them. He throws the pass and then goes with the collision, so it's taking some of the impact away. But he does feel as though he's getting better, and I have to say I'd say that about Dan Bigger as well. I think Dan Bigger has become a better player in his 30s as well. Where again, he's not about self-preservation. He's happy to take it on the line, throw those long passes right on the line, be brave. And again, they kind of seem very similar in personality, but also I think in their growth in the last few years.
Mm. Do all the grade 10 see it as well as Sexton sees it? Is that a common thing, or they have different
No,
strengths?
no. I think he's at the very high end. I think Farrell sees it well. I think Sexton. This isn't just bias. I do think he sees it as well as anyone I've come across.
Mm.
Um, he mightn't be the same athlete as some of the other tens. Mightn't have the same wheels. But his ability to actually see and read play, I think, is nearly unparalleled in what I've come across.
Yeah.
I've seen, obviously, I've never played with Dan Carter. I've watched him, and he's a special player, and he was able to do some magical things. But he also had phenomenal platforms. So I think, obviously, from a decision making point of view, I think he's very high end as well. But I don't think there's too many others that have the ability to take it as aggressively and pick one of three options like he has. I really don't.
Mm.
And that isn't just a bias, a friend or an ex-colleague bias. I genuinely don't see it, and I've wanted to see it in other people, coming through in Ireland, and the problems, they're not even close.
Yeah.
Not even close. Ireland, it's a real concern having him as important as he is at 37 years of age. It is.
Yeah. I know. Sleepless nights ahead for Andy Farrell, I
There
think.
are, there
Yeah.
are, there are, but it's exciting, right?
No. And just on Leinster then, so you've seen them start the season the way they've started the season, and Jenkins has come in, and people have said, well, look, that's an extra bit of beef, which is going to help in the latter stages of Europe. Is there anything else like Leinster need to be very mindful of based on how they've been beaten in Europe in the last couple of years that you'd be kind of keeping an eye out for over the next few months? Or is there just a degree of, oh, look, yeah, they were beaten on the day, but it's mostly pretty damn good. Like, there's not much they can aspire to improve upon.
Yeah, I think the latter.
Okay.
That point. They got beaten in with 20 seconds to go in the Champions Cup final, having not played well against a team that played really well. Yes, they got out-muscled by a really great Saracens team a few years ago. La Rochelle, likewise, in the semi-final. There's nothing. There's really nothing between the teams. You could say that they've lacked a bit of clout, a bit of muscle, and maybe Jenkins is that guy. Is he up in the Brad Thorne, Rocky Elson, Nathan Hines category? I don't think so. But you do need you need a bit of good fortune in those games too, and that hasn't gone Leinster's way in a few games. And you know when it becomes a consistent team, I think you can read into it too much. I, they were the best team in Europe up to the final by a country mile, and then they got beaten by a team that just played better on the day. And it seems like such a shame that Leinster team don't have a Champions Cup, because it's the best season I've seen by a team up until a final. But no trophy at the end, no URC either, as well as Europe. Like, no one will remember it, but that was some really phenomenal rugby they played. I can't remember a club team playing as consistently well, certainly not in the Northern Hemisphere, for a long, long time.
Okay. Just some other points which you've kind of cropped up in the last couple of weeks to get your thoughts on. We'll come to the financial situation in the Premiership in a moment. The other story, and in some respects it's hard to know what to say at this stage, but it's worth noting with you anyway. There was that study which was like front page news everywhere, a study of a group of former Scottish international players. And the very frightening headline is that these players were 15 times more likely to develop motor neuron disease against the general population. It was in the Journal of Neurology, Neurosurgery and Psychiatry. And position on the pitch, interestingly, had no impact. And I'm sure a lot of people thought of Doddy Weir straight away. And it was Willie Stewart in the University of Glasgow who's been at the forefront of several of these studies. They took 412 male Scottish former internationals versus 1,200 in the general population. And Stewart, the doctor, said it was a big surprise. And in effect, the conclusion of the study was this finding requires immediate research and attention ASAP. Like, it was almost sounding the klaxon. We need to find out why this is happening exactly. So Willie Stewart said, I'm genuinely concerned what's happening in the modern game. And if in 20 years' time we repeat this study, I suspect we would see something even more concerning. So these kind of lines are frightening. And then there was the Steve Thompson documentary on BBC. I don't know if you had a chance to see it, but it was
I
his
haven't
kind
I
of,
haven't seen it yet. I haven't
it's
seen it
his,
yet, but
it's
I
his
do have it recorded.
recorded,
Yeah.
yeah. And look, you would have played against him, so you'd be particularly interested. It's as devastating and heartbreaking as you would
Yeah.
imagine, you know. So that aspect running parallel with rugby is very much alive and well, and we've seen the High Court proceedings as well. So that has been lurking as much as ever over the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, I've got 4% on my battery. I wish I had 1%, and that I was going to get cut off in the middle of this answer um because yeah, it is it was difficult reading. It really was. 15 times. I think is motor neuron disease not the one that everyone's petrified, not rugby specific, but the world,
Yeah.
and the one that you're not going to recover from. So to see that 15 times was um I'd say gave a lot of people a jolt. And that's the one, whatever about dementia, 2.5 times, 15 times more likely than motor neuron disease. Um, I think it's one of those, having played, having not been able to go and change anything, that if I went and thought late at night about it, it's certainly not serving any purpose for me. I think you say your prayers, talk to whatever God you believe in, and you just try and continue going and keeping sharp, and get on with life. And I think whatever hand you're dealt, you have to deal with it. You look at the rugby players that have suffered with motor neuron disease. It's such a horrible, debilitating disease that must be so awful for parents or family,
Mm.
or loved ones to see. So I don't really have a point to make at the end of it, other than I was kind of shaken by it, as much as I'm sure most people were. And I saw that World Rugby said that we need to go and do more testing and look into this as a holding statement. Well, they really do, on the back of that sort of information coming through from someone like Willie Stewart, who is highly respected.
Uh, Before you do go, then we'll come back to that subject, I suspect, inevitably. You're covering a lot of Premiership at the moment with BT Sport. The Wasps news has followed the Worcester news. This is, Wasps are a big name on the landscape, so this is looking incredibly serious.
Yeah, it is. It's really serious. Unfortunately, obviously we saw Worcester go last week, and we now had the news that Worcester are going to enter into administration, and the talk is that there are other teams teetering on the brink as well. So it's not just two and gone. It there's a I'm not saying it's a house of cards ready to fall, but there are other clubs definitely in a very, very difficult predicament. I talked about the everyone thinks that if you survive through COVID, well, then you're fine. It's not. It's the ramifications are being felt now, and um, and sometimes in some cases, the business model was struggling at the best of times, and
Mm.
the COVID exacerbated something that was already in difficulty. Um, I suppose first of all you got to think about the livelihoods of those that are no longer playing for the club, be it Worcester or now in Wasps. Whatever about the players that are the very high end players, international players that will get picked up elsewhere, but those that were team players, but now all of a sudden you have to go and try and find a club somewhere else that now cease to be paid. And it's definitely a worrying trend within the game. I think we've seen the financial woes, in Australia, in South Africa, even within Ireland. I think that CVC money, where that was hoped to go initially, ended up plugging holes. But I read Owen Slot today, and he made a very good point on the Times over here in the UK, and he said, "Where have CVC been? They've literally gone to ground. There's, is it not in their best interest to try and help prop these teams up?
Mm.
It's not in the bigger scheme of their level of investment. It's not huge sums are needed from a working capital point of view. But yeah, I don't think there's even been a statement read out around it. So it's kind of the mind boggles a small bit as to where we're at and where we're potentially going to go on this. I just hope that teams are able to find their way through. The product at the moment in the Premiership is outstanding. The games are like Leinster Sharks, they're 70, 80 point thrillers. And so they've got a great product, but it's just a matter of trying to keep the lights on at times in certain clubs. And you'd fear that there might be more bad news coming down the line.
Okay, we'll watch that space. Our rugby coverage and Off the Ball with thanks to Vodafone, main sponsor of the Irish rugby team. We all belong to the team of us. Not the cheeriest end, but your battery survives. So thanks very much for the time. Appreciate it. We'll talk to you soon.
Good man. Thanks, Joe. Talk to you.